Good morning. It's May 24th, 2022. Welcome to Triggered. I'm Cory Morgan. I hope you all had a good long weekend. I know I did. Back in and on the air for Tuesday, though. Another week full of ranting and news and trivial stories. As I'll start with today's observations, the important things you got to make sure not to miss. Yesterday was Victoria Day or Canada Day, or no, sorry, May long weekend, as others like to put it. Of course, we're supposed to work away from our colonial roots. I'm not too concerned about Victoria, but it doesn't hurt my feelings if somebody mentions it. Today, though, is Asparagus Day. Just in case you were wondering, it's important to know it is Asparagus Day. And I mean, not only is asparagus a healthy, fantastic vegetable to eat, but it's got that strange property due to apparently its amino acids or something. And if you look it up, it's a genetic thing. It doesn't do it to everybody, so some people might not understand what I'm talking about. But if you want to really destroy a bathroom, have a bunch of asparagus and chase it with a lot of liquids. Also, it's International Tiara Day, so you can get out there, throw that thing on there, and celebrate and observe. Make sure everybody sees you wearing your best tiara. Don't take your second tiara or third tiara today. Today is the day to wear your best one. So yes, every day there is something to celebrate and something to enjoy. Okay, so we got a couple of good guests on today as usual. In studio, we got our Western Standard reporter and columnist, Chris Oldcorn. He's the guy who comes with, he's bringing us a lot of Saskatchewan news all the time, and he writes weekly columns on other issues. We'll have a talk about his last column and upcoming stuff and some of the things that are going on out in Saskatchewan. We don't talk about that fantastic province nearly enough. There's a lot of interesting things going on over there. And they got some crazy politics that are kind of paralleling ours. Speaking of crazy politics, we got the new leader of the Maverick Party, Colin Krieger, coming on. He just won the leadership week and some ago there in Calgary. He's from up in northern Alberta, and they're trying to set their roots up as a federal alternative for us there. I see all the commenters coming from all over. I see Terry in Vancouver Island and Wendy. And let's see, Lisa out in West Kelowna. I love seeing just, the people coming in from all over the place. It really helps. Reminds me why we do this live thing. Live is a lot of work. It's a lot of planning, but it makes for that great interaction between, you guys with each other, with me. Throw guests my way towards the questions my way, throw them towards the guests, things like that. We don't necessarily read them all, but we do see that interaction and chat with each other. Just keep it civil if we can. All right, so I'm going to talk about, it shouldn't be too dull. I'm going to talk about how I spent my weekend on the long weekend. Yes, went down and visited my mother in Idaho, and actually it was a great time. So I went down to Sandpoint, Idaho, and I tell you, the Idaho Panhandle is a beautiful and underrated region to visit, by the way. The lakes rival anything the Okanagan has to offer, and it's only a short drive from Alberta. So there's my plug for Sandpoint, Idaho, but I really mean it. It's great down there. Now, in heading south, I was at the American border crossing for a little more than a few minutes. The cars ahead of me flowed through the border quickly, and I wasn't asked much more than the standard questions, such as how long I'd be staying and the purpose of my visit, and then I was waved through. Nothing else, nothing more. Returning to Canada, though, was a different story. The lineup of cars stretched for kilometers up the highway. We languished in our car for well over an hour as the line inched agonizingly slowly towards the border. There were 4 stations open at the border crossing, and usually that's more than enough to handle the traffic, even on weekends. So why was it going so slowly? It's because they were messing around verifying everybody's vaccine status. Now, there's an ArriveCan app, and it works well for those who are vaccinated and have set it up. When we finally actually got to the border crossing, our vaccine status was established quickly, and we were through within a couple of minutes. Clearly, though, many haven't set up the app, and a number of people, of course, aren't going to get vaccinated. Then the verification has to rely on paper and as another means of proof, or the person is pulled aside and slapped with a pile of quarantine and testing requirements. And Canadian airports, of course, are even worse right now. It's a ridiculous song and dance at the border, and it isn't making anybody any safer. It's just another facet of the government's obsession with trying to harass people into getting vaccinated. A vaccination doesn't do anything to stop the spread of COVID-19. That's no longer conjecture. It's well-established medical fact. Blocking the unvaccinated or forcing them to endure rounds of testing and quarantining is not slowing or stopping any viral spread, and it's coming with a heavy cost for Canadians in the hospitality and tourism sector. Now, while I was down in Idaho, we attended a large annual antique car show. It's a great thing. It was a great time. We saw some fantastic automobiles throughout the streets. They did the whole downtown up. Not a single electric car was to be found, of course. I don't think our grandchildren are going to be attending shows to admire classic Chevy Volts, but I digress. The other noteworthy sight was the number of Canadian license plates on cars in the area. BC and Alberta plates made up probably about a quarter of the plates around town. Thousands of Canadians had come down for the weekend, and it was serving the town well. Restaurants and pubs were bustling, hotels were full, and stores did great trade. It was nice seeing so many people out and about, enjoying themselves and spending some money. Also, in my anecdotal license plate studies, I noted that pretty much every vehicle languishing with me in the border lineup to return to Canada was Canadian. There was hardly an American plate to be seen. Due to having family down there, I've made this trip dozens of times over the years, and I've never seen such a dearth of American plates heading up to visit Canada. The bottom line is we're too expensive and we're too much of a pain in the ass to visit. Our vaccination requirements eliminate a number of potential visitors, while the testing and other requirements discourage others from bothering. While some might dismiss these things as trivial inconveniences, those inconveniences are keeping untold numbers of American visitors from coming to Canada, and it's costing us a fortune. You can't beat tourist dollars for economic stimulus. Foreigners are literally bringing money from elsewhere here and spreading it around our businesses. Tourism directly employed nearly 1 million Canadians, indirectly almost 2 million Canadians when that's brought into account back in 2019. The economic benefit was about $20 billion. It's big business, and we're cutting deeply into it for no discernible benefit. The weather's warming, and there's millions of tourists, not just in the United States, around the world, and they're eager to visit Canada and spend money here. Our economy's taken a beating this last few years, and it's ridiculous that we're hindering our recovery by stubbornly clinging to these vaccine mandates. This is going to be the third summer since COVID-19 appeared in the world. We've already decimated our tourism sector with lockdowns over the last 2 summers. Let's open the doors and let the tourism sector recover. We got businesses continuing to close permanently while foreign tourists are finding new world destinations to visit. They might not come back. Let's end the pointless mandates now. All right, that's what's got me ranting as I come back. Let's check in with our news editor, Dave Naylor, and see what else is burning up the news lines with the Western Standard here. Along with the Battle of Alberta, I see Nico's got the logo on the bottom there.
Hey, buddy, where's my bottle from Duty Free?
I know. I hang my head in shame. I was to bring you one. I committed. It was. I'm going to blame it on that lineup at the border. I didn't want to pull out a line and go into that duty-free store, so I said, sorry, Dave, you're out of luck, but I just got to get through this.
All right, well, maybe this will be my last news update then. Why would I want to do stuff for you?
Well,
so let's just get right on with it then, shall we? Pierre Poilievre has written a letter to Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland calling for an end to the carbon tax on gasoline. He says in his travels in the Conservative leadership race, everybody from British Columbia to Newfoundland is complaining that the gas rates or gas costs are too high. And yeah, he's quite right. It cost me $73 this weekend to fill up my little Honda Civic. Imagine that. We got the latest on the monkeypox vaccine, which is going around the world now. Belgium has introduced compulsory quarantines for sufferers of monkeypox. Apparently, there was some big raves in Europe over the weekend, and there's a lot of new cases developing from those. Our Oilers fan, Lee Harding, has got a story up on why Connor McDavid is the greatest ever. And he's certainly playing like it against the Flames. They were, don't know if you watched the game from Idaho, but they were truly atrocious on Sunday. We got a good story on CRA, the tax man. Apparently they've got so little to do. A lot of them have second jobs during the day at work. While they're busy auditing me, they're also busy doing other work. So nice work if you can get it, I guess. And the head of Via Rail has suddenly quit her $300,000 a year job because, well, she's not saying why, and the Liberals won't tell us why, but she had 2 years to go on the contract, so must have been some sort of problem. So I got more than a dozen stories up already this morning, Cory. Those are just some of the highlights, and there'll be more to come this afternoon. Our Mel Risden and Matthew Horwood are monitoring World Economic Forum events, and we'll have no doubt lots of stories out of there. And all we can say is go Flames go. And unfortunately, I will not be able to drink a toast to their victory because I was hoping for some gin, a cheap border gin.
Well, how about this? I'll buy you a drink at lunchtime today.
Well, geez, thanks, man.
Okay, see, I know. It's a start.
It's a start, very small start.
I'll try to make up for it. Thanks, Dave. I
Thanks,
appreciate
Cory.
that. All right. Talk to you later. That's our news editor, Dave Naylor, in there. Yes, he's quite upset. I went and broke my word for my own convenience in a border lineup and didn't get him a good bottle on the way up. Though the next time I go to the States, hopefully we'll have much better things, and I'll just have to make up for it with a bigger bottle or of higher quality. Liquor is important to many in the media industry. It keeps a lot of people sane when we're on the brink as it stands. So that reminder, though, all those stories, all of those authors, all of those columnists, they're all on at westernstandard.news. And the reason we can do it, guys, is because of you, because of the subscribers. It's the only way we can do that. Thank you all who have been subscribing. It's been fantastic. They keep building up as the legacy media keeps embarrassing themselves, putting out terrible content, putting out their biased stuff. More and more people are discovering us, coming our way. And it just leads to a great cycle. We expand, we get more reporters, we give more content, and it's just a great development with new media as things are moving. We don't have to have those giant big three anymore. We got a lot of different sources around. If you haven't subscribed already, though, guys, this is where to come for it. westernstandard.news. Go to membership and use a coupon code TRIGGERED. You'll save yourself $10. And if you take it out for a year, $99 for a year, it comes in well under $10 a month, less than you'd spend for a newspaper subscription in the past, and you help support us and keep carrying out the content we've got. And yes, I'm going to talk a bit about that tomorrow when I get my rant going. But, the World Economic Forum is going on right now. It's in Davos. We've got, we don't have anybody out there covering it with the Western Standard. We do a lot of Canadian news, but we write stories on these things, of course, and all that. And I'll have somebody look into that, Wendy. Thank you. Sorry, I'm just responding to a commenter for the people on audio there. So the World Economic Forum, it's that group. We've talked about it before. I've ranted about it before. And it's, a group of the elites. The funny thing with them is people get dismissed for being conspiracy theorists, for even talking about them or pointing them out or whatever's going on over there. But there's no conspiracy. There's nothing hidden. There are some crazed things on their agenda. It's right out in the open. They want centralized world government. They want socialism. They want hardcore economic controls on nations. They want the Great Reset. But the other half of the coin, because we are concerned about all the things we want, we do have to remember we aren't bound by any of the crap these guys want to put out either. Just because they say they want all this doesn't mean that any of our political leaders actually have to do any of those things. They want to influence leaders. We see it with, Prime Minister Ding Dong. That's why the concern is as strong as it's getting these days with Trudeau, because he's a very influential, if that's a word, he's a guy who can be quite easily swayed with things. He doesn't think a lot for himself. So if he goes to a conference somewhere like that, gets some ideas into his head, yes, we could certainly see him thinking, hey, I kind of like this and I want to move on with it. So we do have to watch it. We do have to be concerned about it. But at the same time, they aren't as powerful as they would like to be. So it's kind of a balance. Some people accuse anybody and everybody of being with them, or if they've been close to them, or if they shared an elevator with somebody who'd attended one, that they might be part of the grand conspiracy. And it's not quite that far either. Just like Shirley Gervais saying, with Calgary Conservative MP Michelle Rempel, what was she doing when she attended? Now, to give credit, I'm not thrilled with Michelle Rempel these days, I tell you, with some of her weird stuff and her low tactics, I think, on the Brown campaign and the Conservative leadership with her race baiting and garbage. But all the same, she did attend one years ago, and she's been open about, why she attended. You got to remember these conferences, they have a big open invite. Anybody of even moderate influence and some means can get over there and attend and watch the seminars, the speeches, the events, things like that. It's an invite thing, but they invite thousands. So it's not a tiny exclusive club. And just because you've been there doesn't mean you adhere to whatever they told you while you were there. It's an indication, I guess, if you wanted to take time out of your life and go there and rub shoulders with those people and talk about those things. But we got to be careful. We smear anything and everybody with this, you're part of the WEF conspiracy. And no, not everybody is. We've seen that here with things. People say, you're Standard, you covered this, you're part of the WEF. No. I only wish Mr. Schwab was paying my bills, and nothing against my mother. But, my vacation would have gone a lot farther than just Sandpoint, Idaho, if I had a Schwab putting millions of dollars into my bank account in order to get selective coverage for his agenda out there. So no, their conspiracy isn't as deep as some think, but they do exist, and they are a threat, and they are a problem. So we just got to look at them carefully with a balanced eye and watch what's going on, watch what they say, watch what the people who have it tend to come back and say, and bear these things in mind. It's just the debate gets sometimes too heated and almost discredits itself sometimes when we get a little too wound up with what that group represents. But what they represent is odious and nasty. But yeah, I see some questions from some folks, about the new website and subscriptions. I would suggest, sending an email to info@westernstandard.news and somebody in operations will fix you up. But we do have a new website, and it's, had some hiccups and things for some folks. Usually it's just a matter of resetting a password, and you should be on your way. So before we get to Chris Oldcorn here, I will speak one more time to the other thing that keeps us going, because we are capitalists, are our sponsors. And a big sponsor of ours, and a really good one, is Bitcoin Well. These guys have been sponsoring us for quite some time. They're a good Canadian company, and they help you navigate the waters of digital currencies. Whether you're looking to invest in it, whether you're just looking for a little side thing, whether you're just curious, you want to know. That's the main thing. That's what their site's good about. It helps you learn and understand how it works and find out if it is for you. And as you can see on the text, if you're watching this on the digital, it's a non-custodial company. That means they never hang on to your money. It's always in your hands. They just educate and facilitate the process. Free one-on-one consultations. You can sit down with a person face-to-face and talk about it, and they will advise you, and you make your mind up with these things. Because you got to watch that. Unfortunately, there are a lot of people out there trying to steal your money. There are always one scam or another out there. Well, this is a publicly traded company with ATMs all across Canada. They're not out to rip you off. Check it out. If you're going to get into digital currencies, go through a reputable Canadian company to do it. BitcoinWell.com. And they're a great sponsor, of course. All right, let's get to our guest in studio. We have, as the camera pans out, there he is. Video magic, Christopher Oldcorn, all the way from Saskatchewan. Hey, glad to see you back in here today.
Yes, happy to be back in the studio.
Right on. So yeah, in time in Alberta to catch one of the Battle of Alberta is going on anyways.
Yeah, they even in Saskatchewan, like in the media scrums, everybody's talking. Every politician comes out, starts talking about which team they're cheering for, because there is no hockey team in Saskatchewan, so they're Flames or Oilers fans.
You got to come over this way. Yeah, well, I hope that the Flames could pick it up. I mean, I'm not one of those who's going to pretend to be an incredible hockey fan. But I like the Flames because I'm in Calgary and area and so on. But also, I just want this series to go. Let's not have a blowout. I mean, this is a rare opportunity. Let's make this competitive.
Speaking of blowouts, that first game scored more goals than the teams did in the previous series.
Oh, I know. It was nuts. It was getting like a football score.
Like, is there any goalies in that, or are they just shooting?
Yeah, it was odd playing. Yeah. So let's start with, I guess, last weekend. So just to let everybody know, Chris writes a lot of news for us in Saskatchewan and copy there, of course, and everything. But you also you have a weekly column, and you get your opinion out there as well. And we distinguish between those. Those are very distinct things. And
I don't comment on Saskatchewan.
No, with Saskatchewan, you're writing news and you're staying unbiased. But I mean, hey, everybody's got an opinion and a view, of course. And as long as you're fair about saying when it's opinion and when it's news, then it's a good balance. Yeah. So let's talk about last weekend's opinion column. It's one of the ones that tends to ruffle a lot of feathers. It's a sensitive issue, and that's on the transgender language battle, basically. Yes,
there's a lot going on, obviously, with transgenderism in schools, as we can see, not just in Canada, but in the U.S. and DeSantis's bill in Florida, preventing sex from being talked about in kindergarten classes. I don't know how this is really a thing, since when I was in school, I think we didn't have sex ed until grade 7, and parents had to sign a permission form. Now you can give a kid life-altering hormone drugs and not have to tell the parents, because it's the privacy of the kid. Like, it makes no sense. But what I talked about this past weekend is, I call it the transgender mob. And that is basically, there's a group of individuals that are pushing an ideology that doesn't actually affect that many people. I mean, I actually have a psychology degree, and when I graduated in 2008, back then, transgenderism was called gender dysphoria. It still is today as a technical medical term, but it was treated as a mental illness back then. Just to give you an example, people with gender dysphoria have 10 times higher chance of committing suicide than someone in the regular population. And the way that people people are dealing with this now is to transition the person from male to female or from female to male. And as we know, biology says, no, that's not exactly how it works. And because of that, you're now seeing a huge backlash against it. We've seen the thing with Disney, for example. And there was a professor that did a report. And the reason she did this report on this sort of rise, and it's been since 2010, that there's been this massive rise in females wanting to transition to males. Well, it turns out, she called it rapid onset gender dysphoria. It turned out she studied, what happens when one person in a school decides that they're transgender. All of a sudden, it catches on in the school. I know when I was in journalism school in the UK, there was one grade school with kids up to the age of 12 where 20% of the students were medically transitioning in a single school. Now, she called it a social contagion, basically means it's being passed not genetically. There's no way the human beings would have changed that much genetically that all of a sudden this rapid rise in transgenderism would happen. It's just, there's no way for it to genetically happen that fast without some sort of huge change in humans genetically, and we would notice that in some way, shape, or form. So she released her study and said it's based on entirely, it's a social thing. First, a kid will see something on TikTok, and then that kid will want to transition. And then the next thing you know, it's a peer group thing. Oh, maybe I should transition. And then all of a sudden, you got 4 or 5 students in a single grade, a single peer group that all of a sudden feel that they're the opposite sex. And then they go about doing, life alternating.
Well, and that's where the concern comes, is if you start doing irreversible changes. I mean, fine, let kids consider things, try things, and some, I think, it's opinion, but are genuinely trans, and even once they become adults, they're going to say, I identify as such, and I'd like to transition, and I'll go. But when you see those numbers that high, yes, then this, again, let's not start some hormone replacement and things that might stunt things when a kid, as we know, as we did, you change your mind on everything every 6 months. You don't have to make a life-altering decision. They can't vote until they're 18, yet we're allowing a permanent body alteration. It's a dangerous territory.
Without parental permission. I mean, the funny thing is, if my daughter has a headache at school, they have to call me to get permission to give her a Tylenol, but they don't to give her life-alternating puberty blockers. I mean, she can't go to the zoo on a school field trip without me signing something, but all of a sudden over in this one area, nope, sorry, parents, you're not involved in this anymore. And I think it's just a part of a larger assault on family values that we've seen, particularly in the last 25, 30 years. And it's gotten to the point that it's somewhat ridiculous. I mean, in Wisconsin right now, there's a school with 3 middle school students. They're 12 and 13 years old. And they're being charged with sexual assault for not using the preferred pronouns of a classmate. They use the biological pronouns. If you look up in Wisconsin what the definition of sexual assault is and what you can be charged for sexual assault for, using the wrong pronouns isn't one of those things. And so we're now seeing this craziness go into the court system just because some 13-year-olds will not call a classmate he when it's a she. And it's not just that. Like, I don't know if you've seen this, but Target this past weekend in the States came out with an entire, there's cups, there's clothing, you name it, everything. And it's all transgender. So you can buy a mug that says they or their on them, so people know your proper pronouns.
Well, they can have at it. I mean,
we'll see if it actually sells.
Yeah, that line you're talking about being crossed, though, is when you're criminally charging people for saying things. I mean, it's an unfortunate trend, I think, in the sense that the activists have taken it over, though, the extreme end of it. I mean, we saw this when gay rights, I think, thankfully, were brought up and did much better and came out in the open, and we had pride events. And then the activist element, though, you go to a pride event, and I went to some of those in the 90s. It helped me change, my thinking and become more tolerant and accepting of people, getting to interact and meet people. And but there was always the one who insists also that I want to put on a leather G-string and stick my ass in somebody's face during the parade, or it should be my right to swing my nuts around on a float. And you got to push it too far. Yeah. But the difference now, it seems, with the trans activists, and I know not a lot of, one trans adult, it seems she's very well adjusted and knows what she wants and knows what she did. but she's not out there with the screaming activist element who's on the front line. And we're not indulging, we shouldn't be indulging the extreme fringe, yet here we are.
Unfortunately, I mean, the definition of democracy is mob rule, but right now it's not. And I don't mean mob in like, kill 'em sense of a mob, but I mean, that's the definition of democracy. The largest group gets to kind of decide the rules. And we're seeing a change in that, where a small minority group is making the rules for everybody else and then trying to do the same thing onto them. And that is where the issues come up. And parents need to start being involved in any of these medical decisions. Like it's important for parents to be involved in their kids. Like if my daughter decided that she was trans, I would hope the school would come to me and tell me before they would start doing things. Like in the olden days, that would happen no matter what it was. And it's interesting you mentioned about the gay pride and back in the 90s and stuff like that. I have had people reach out to me who are in the LGB part of the community who do not like all these other things being tacked onto them because, one, there's a sexual preference. Transgender has nothing to do with sexual preference. And some people in the community are upset that they're being put all together when in reality it's kind of different.
Well, the alphabet crowd's getting really crowded
and
complicated. And I mean, the trans community is fighting a lot with the feminist community now too. Because,
well, that's the thing. There's
women have been fighting as feminists for their unique identity and who they are and to establish. And then suddenly, Larry over there says, "Oh, I'm a woman this week," and you have to indulge Loretta, and whatever that may be, and can I, there's where some of the ridiculousness came along too, is when it came to the point of just identifying. The second somebody identifies, suddenly you're calling it full blown. I mean, I don't know how you measure it, but there should be a degree of commitment. I mean, if the nuts and berries are still hanging there, I'm sorry, but technically you're a guy.
Caitlyn Jenner is a guy. I mean, hasn't had surgery.
And if you want to be called she, and as much as I can indulge, I'm fine with that, of course. But sports,
that's where I have the biggest issue.
Prisons, we've had that. I mean,
we've had some very serious problems in prisons.
What was it?
And hospitals.
Yes, I mean, there's cases where we segregate people of different sexes for a reason.
Yep, there was a hospital in the UK where a woman was raped, and it took the hospital a year to admit that she was raped.
And you wrote on that before.
And I wrote about that before because they said no, there's no males on this wing because there was a transgender person. Well, not only was it witnessed by a nurse, there was video, and it took the hospital a year to admit that it was a man. And when the police called the hospital, they said, no, that couldn't have happened. There was no men on the ward.
Yeah, well, there's an American prison. I think there were 2 female prisoners got pregnant from a trans roommate or cellmate, I guess you could say, or whatnot. Like, it's just we're getting to the point of absurdity. And I mean, allow a nuanced discussion. I think we can be sensitive while just maintaining some common sense on some of these things. Try, but they've shut down the discussion. That's the problem.
And that's the problem, is that as soon as you say something like, oh, you're transphobic. Well, no, I just want to have a discussion about this. I'm not saying that some people shouldn't transition. What I'm saying is there needs to be a conversation, particularly with minors, like that. As a parent, I want any decision medically about my daughter to be involved in that.
So here's where it gets a little more dicey too, though. I mean, some kids might genuinely be, being trans or so on, moving towards it. When the gay straight alliances were a big issue in Alberta for a while and a big problem, but there was a valid point put out that unfortunately there are some intolerant or abusive parents out there sometimes. And if some parents might have found out that their child was gay, they could potentially abuse or be abusive or just not respond well to it. So the kid would only feel safe in the school environment to start, coming into their being and realizing who they are and so on. It's just a complicated area, is all I'm saying. I mean, the parental involvement is critical, as you say, especially when there's medical involvement in what we're talking about.
And it's life alternating.
Yes.
Life altering. Like, we're not talking about deciding to wear a different color t-shirt or something. We're talking about things that, medically speaking, like once you do something, you can't go back.
No, and that's part of, that's where I debated a bit when I did a podcast interview with Tiffany, who I've spoken with, and she's trans, but she felt that the gender, blocking isn't necessarily as permanent. I don't know. I mean, part of the goal though is to get it as fast as you can, so you can stop things from developing, because it makes it for a more complete transition later.
Yes. Okay,
I can understand the need, but again, that shows that it's irreversible. Then we're talking, if with a 12-year-old, a 13-year-old,
Yeah.
are they really sure yet?
Yeah, and I'm doing a story on Jazz Jennings. She was interviewed in 2007 by Barbara Walters, her and her family, and she decided to transition at a very young age, about 5. And she's now in her 20s, and she had a reality show for 7 or 8 years about her living her trans life through school and stuff like that. And now she has had multiple surgeries to try and fix certain issues, including at one point she was told not to look between her legs by both her doctor and her parents. She's gained 100 pounds, she's depressed, and she's come out publicly now talking about this and being like, like they took part of her colon to make a female body part. Originally she was male, but she was raised as a female that whole time. And so there are some people who have a lot of issues with the surgeries and what happens, and things that just don't work correctly the way they're supposed to.
There's just a lot to be discussed. I mean, there's a lot of misunderstanding. It's like, some of the commenting we got, I just, in looking at Wilder saying homosexual proclivities are a learned behavior. That's a load of baloney, buddy. They don't choose it. And you can't choose to, I can't choose not to be straight. I'm sorry, nothing I do, no amount of movies or instruction or anything else is going to change that. And for a gay person, you're not going to make them suddenly crave the opposite. It doesn't work.
No.
I know there's some people who feel
like that, what do they call it? The conversion therapy
therapies
camps.
and things like. All you can really do is mess with somebody. If you've got somebody who really is gay and you try and push and you're just going to really make it much worse.
Well, the guy who ran the biggest conversion therapy camps in the U.S. ended up shutting it down because he realized he wasn't helping anyone, and he realized he was just fighting his own battles inside of him, and then went back and said, you know what? I'm gay, and I don't think any amount of this therapy is going to work. It hasn't worked in these camps I've done.
No.
It hasn't worked for me. It's just biologically the way I'm made up.
The main one that gets me is say people who were gay in the 70s and 80s, it wasn't illegal yet, but I mean, you got ostracized. You went through grief. You put up with crap with your
Unfortunately,
family.
that still happens.
Do you really think people chose that? I'm sure I can't imagine it wasn't there. I was fortunate in the sense that I was always with the majority. I didn't have to question myself or where I was going. But I mean, I'm sure a lot when they were coming into it was just, why can't I be straight? Why can't I? Because they can't, because that's not who they are. And
one of my friends, his dad threw a brick at him when he told him he was gay, like a literal brick.
So
and thinking that would make him straight. And I was like, no, that just hurt your kid.
So it's just a tough area. That's the main goal. And with kids, but again, with somebody coming out or learning about themselves, becoming gay, it's not the same as starting to get ready for surgery. Or transitional drugs. Okay, we've been on this for a bit though. Let's talk about some of your other stuff. You had a story. Well, let's talk about your next column though. Actually, you're already thinking a bit about that or looking ahead, or
well, I have a story that came out today on there is a repeat sexual offender with child pornography who it was just released publicly, but earlier, like last month, he had his when you commit certain crimes, in this case child pornography, when you're getting sentenced, you go in front of a certain type of judge to see whether or not you should be put on the National Sex Offender Registry list. And there's 2 parts to the list that you can be put on. Now, this guy is a repeat offender. It's been a long problem for this individual. They were first caught in 2008, charged, went to jail, came out, caught again in 2019. This is the second time uploading child pornography to, they won't tell us what website, but an unidentified website. And it was reported by the website. So obviously it wasn't,
they didn't want it.
They didn't want it on that website, whatever website it was. And so this guy got the child unit in the Saskatchewan police force, was able to track it to his house. They did go to his house. They looked at his phone first. That was the only warrant they had originally. They found child pornography on his cell phone. Since he was on his own property, they can then search the whole property, which they did. They found computers. They found like USB drives. They found another cell phone with pornography on it, all child pornography, and obviously arrested him. And this is the second time. And so he had this court hearing, and he got what is called a long-term offender list. Now, this is not the one that you want to put someone on who has been a repeat offender. There is one called the dangerous offenders, and that's a permanent list. That's when you're on the registry. You have to register wherever you live. You're under constant supervision if you ever get out of jail for the rest of your life. And quite often, the ones who are on the dangerous offenders list actually have no end to their sentence until they feel that they could be possibly safely put outside of the criminal justice system. So he gets 6 years in jail for all of the different offenses. There was multiple offenses. And then he's going to have 10 years of being on this long-term list. Now he's 50, which means he's by his mid-60s, he's going to be back out with no supervision at all, because the longest you could be on that long-term list is 10 years. This now puts him in a position that by his mid-60s, he could be repeat offending and going for his third jail sentence for child pornography. Also in his sentence, there was no limit when he gets out on whether or not he can have access to the internet or a cell phone and things like that. Quite often that is put onto those sorts of offenses to prevent the ability for that person to even commit the crime again. He also got time served as well, which means that in 48 months, he's going to be back out on the street. And then 10 years, he'll have the long-term supervision list. This is, I think, a prime example of some of the problems we have with the sex registry list in Canada. He has clearly, and you can go and look at this on the government website, it lists what you need to be considered a dangerous offender. One of the things is just possessing child porn. Never mind uploading it onto sites and sharing it with others, which he did. The only thing he didn't do was actually create the pornography himself. Still, the distribution is also a major issue, and he distributed it in multiple different places, and he had thousands of images. This type of behavior does not deserve 6 years in jail. I mean, he was not released to the public, so he got his time served counted towards his 6 years. So he couldn't make bail because he was too dangerous to be let out back into the community, but we're going to let him out in 48 months. It just does not make any sense.
It's ridiculous. And I was searching for a while if people saw me looking for something while you were talking, because we had a story by Arthur Green the other day too. This is
here in Alberta.
A convicted child rapist is on the lam with new charges. We knew he was a child rapist, and now he's gone out again, and he's aggravated assault, forcible confinement, rape, theft of a motor vehicle. A victim was a woman. And in a story I wrote last week, or a column, I was going on about 3 Alberta women, all killed in the last year by repeat offenders. One was the police warned us. They said, this man's a sex offender. We know he's going to reoffend. Watch out for him. He's probably going to assault a woman and or a child. And it turned out he killed a woman and a child. The other one who shot a young lady and killed her, a 23-year-old. He had a long history in and out of jail with domestic abuse, and police warned again. And these guys are on supposed registries, but they're obviously not watching it very closely because they're getting in and near victims again and doing these things. Our system.
There's something broken in our criminal justice
definitely
system.
Something.
I mean, even if you look at the U.S. Supreme Court justice, I realize that's America, but the latest justice that just she'll be put on court shortly. One of the big things at her hearings was her very short sentencing for people, child rapists, child porn, giving them like 2 years, like the absolute bare minimum. And it's like, why are you giving some person like this that rapes a kid like 2 years in jail? How does that make any sense at all?
There's certain ones you'd think would be no-brainers that almost all of society is horrified by, wants to prevent, wants to stop. Yet we can't seem to keep them.
And they're also the highest reoffenders.
Yes, the terrible recidivism rate.
Child porn guy here, he's a repeat offender, 2008, which means he was viewing it before 2008, because that was the first time he was caught.
Yeah.
Who knows how long he was actually viewing and possessing and transmitting this to other individuals before he actually got caught. And that's the problem. This guy has clearly been involved in child pornography for over a decade and a half.
So what are you going to be looking at this weekend that you were going to expand further on that, you were saying?
Yeah, well, I'm going to do my opinion column this weekend on this individual type of thing, and sort of the attack we've seen on children in terms of the lack of in this case, protecting kids from someone who's a child pornographer, and also, going out and, transitioning kids from one sex to another without even asking the parents' permission. I feel that there's a sort of assault on kids right now, and we as parents kind of need to stand up and be like, look, someone who's convicted of child porn doesn't get 6 years, they get 25. Think of the psychological damage to a child being involved in child pornography. 6 years for this dude over here, but he affected how many kids because of his addiction to child pornography and the effects on them for the rest of their lives. And then you have also things like the transgender thing. You're affecting a kid for the rest of their life. Parents should be involved in that situation, and they're not. And in many cases, there's a case in Florida where a father was going to court to stop his kid from transitioning because his ex-wife was transitioning the child. He lost the court case because he was only the father. And we're seeing this over and over again, this assault on kids. And we need to stand up and start protecting our kids and being involved in the equation. Because right now, in certain states, and even in provinces, you're taken out of the equation completely. And since when do we allow the educational system to decide our kids? I mean, it's getting to the point now that it's almost like homeschooling is starting to look really good, because of this complete assault on kids and particularly, family values in general.
Just let kids be kids. Why is it so hard?
Yeah.
They got a whole lifetime after 16, 18 years old to move on and adjust 18, and grow and learn. And
if you're 18 and you want to transition, I have absolutely no issues with that because you're an adult.
With a lot of this too, where they're hung up, at 6 or 7 years old. Come on, guys, they're eating dirt under the slide.
Yeah.
They are not making life decisions at this point. Quit trying to push, just let them go.
Yeah.
But we're not allowed to say that these days. Well, they're trying not to, but we're still saying it for now. And I appreciate you coming in to say it all for us today. Before I let you go, then, because we're kind of running over time. But it's good. It's always good talking to you. Anything else you're covering on the news quickly before we let you run?
There's a new political party in Saskatchewan called the Sask United Party. I've met with some of the leaders of the party. I've had 3 stories up already about them. You can go and kind of see what their platform is. But some of the things we're talking about here, they want to reform the educational curriculum so that families are involved in the decisions, even so much as, permission to have, like when I was a kid, your parents had to sign a permission form for you to have sexual education in grade 7. They want to bring things like that back. But then they're also talking about, no lockdowns, or these digital IDs and forced vaccinations. And they also are interested in civil liberties in general being given back to citizens. Now, some of the people involved with this, you might recognize some names, is Jerry Ritz, his former federal agricultural minister, Nadine Wilson, who's an MLA in the Saskatchewan legislature. She's involved in it as an advisor. And then there's a couple other people. Ken Rutherford, he ran as a Maverick Party candidate at one point. He's involved with, on the board of directors of the new party.
Small seat conservative type of alternative.
They're basically like other parties popping up, like the Ontario Party, the New Blue Party in Ontario in this election, because a lot of the conservative parties, the Saskatchewan Party, has been just moving away from conservatism in general. And they had 1,200 people at their first meeting in Saskatoon. And then they had 300 in Regina a couple days later. And they've been going around the province. They've gotten 250 people in places like North Battleford, which is only like, I think, 12,000 people in total.
It's significant.
They are getting good numbers.
Those seeds are starting. And again, I've been involved in a lot of small party organizing and growing, and sometimes we would have town hall meetings where you'd have 10 people. And if you get 100 and a couple hundred starting to show up, you're getting some momentum. So it shouldn't be dismissed.
They're almost at the amount of signatures they need to become an official party, which means they can then get donations. They can open an office. They can hire staff. They are now able through Elections Saskatchewan to, you can actually now online go in and actually sign to be one of the 2,500 because there's a couple of rules to become an official party. So
great. Well, thank you very much for coming in to talk with us today. Good to see you out here in Calgary. I'm sure we'll talk again, perhaps remotely, but I appreciate the coverage out there in Saskatchewan, Chris. It was always a good discussion. And to remind everybody else, it's Christopher Oldcorn on westernstandard.news. Lots of stories and information out there on the go.
Thank you very much, Cory.
All right. I'll talk to you later.
See ya.
Okay, so yes, as I said, that was Chris Oldcorn. You can find him there, as Nico brought it up on the camera, at on our news site and in the opinion section as well. So watch for him on both ends. He's covers a lot of ground, good and prolific, and as you can see, likes to have good, candid discussion. And hey, some people like questions about other things. You can email Chris too. Contact information's on the site if you wanted to ask more about things. Reach out to him. He'll talk to you about some of the background and things he'd been working on. Before I get on to my next guest, I see him in the lobby there. I will talk about one of our sponsors. I know some people were mentioning Firearms. That's the Canadian Shooting Sports Association. You know, here's one of the areas, again, where we seem to be letting our most vicious of criminals out, yet we're criminalizing people for wanting to own and enjoy a firearm. Well, the Canadian Shooting Sports Association is out there to make sure that you stand up for yourself, or they'll stand up for you at least. And they lobby, they push, they bring up the news, they remind people this is what the government's doing. I mean, they've brought back the long gun registry through a backdoor channel. They, of course, keep recategorizing different types of hunting rifles and things like that and calling them assault-style weapons and taking your property away. The Canadian Shooting Sports Association is standing up for those rights. But, hey, you've got to get on with them for them to help you. You got to take out a membership. That's the way it works. And then they can stand up for you and keep your things going. There's all sorts of resources, too, like any other association. I mean, links to local firearm shows or news stories applying to firearms, or videos for safe operation of firearms, just all things firearm. The CSSA covers those things and talks about them. So check them out, CSSA-CILA.org. And make sure, again, if you don't stand up for yourself, guys, they will take your rights away from you. Let's see. Wilder's asking how I feel about open or concealed carry. I'm bigger on open carry than concealed. It's funny. I was down in Idaho, and I got my mother's husband. He's very he's a supporter of firearm rights, very much so. But he just gets furious when he sees people walking around with a firearm. You know, why does that guy need that? Maybe he is compensating for a microchode. I don't know. You know, the guy walking around with the firearm. But I don't care if they do. It doesn't bother me. You know, it's a big area. Like there's Second Amendment fighters in the States who want absolutely no controls on firearms whatsoever. I'm not there, but I want very, very little. Like, I believe in licensing. I'm not so bad with that. You know, I don't mind a person having to go through some form of background check if they got a history of violent crimes or mental illness or abusive things. Perhaps, and again, it doesn't necessarily stop them anyways. I mean, if a person's really determined, they're going to go get one anyways. But allow for one tier for people to responsibly get out and have some degree of registration, so people will be off their case, not on it. Then I'm not so opposed to that. But at the same time, you know, we're cracking down on getting grandpa's old duck gun out of somebody's basement while there's gang wars going on in Toronto with stolen handguns and handguns that have been smuggled in from the United States. Our criminal justice system just does not have its priorities straight. And it's not doing us any favors. Calgary had 2 shootings yesterday. Calgary, one day. And we're over, I think, 60 shootings in the city this year. The cops won't say whatever if they had a mouthful of it. But, I mean, the reality is we're in the middle of a gang war in Calgary. And the shootings are happening every day. And you know what? You don't hear about it with a long gun. It's not a hunting rifle that's doing it. It's not a duck gun. They're stolen or smuggled handguns that are committing these crimes. And unless we actually target where it's happening, we're never going to address it. All right, let's bring somebody in. He can talk about some federal law issues and things like that. This is the newly elected leader of the Maverick Party, Colin Krieger. He's from up, I believe, in Valley View, Alberta. I've had him on. It's been quite a while now, but we've got him on the show today. How you doing, Colin?
I'm doing really good. It's good to be here. How are you today?
Good. So you're settling into your role. I mean, you know, every leadership race, it's a little tiring. It's a lot of work and everything. You know, probably get a week or two of good sleep afterwards before starting to move ahead.
Well, you know, we haven't been taking too much of a break. There's a lot to do, so we're trying to keep up the ethic that we kept throughout the campaign. But there is a lot to do, I'll admit.
Yeah, so that was a close race. You know, I mean, something I saw, and I know from talking to you guys, I did actually go to cover it, you know, at the event at the Big Rock. That was a good time, some great appies. But, you know, just to remind everybody, too, it wasn't a hostile race. It was a nice, friendly leadership race. You know, Tarek was a really good candidate, too. And even though, you know, it was 52-48, it's not like your party split 52-48. It's just that's the way the decision went. And there's a lot of respect and unity still going on, right?
Absolutely, of course. Nothing but absolute respect for Tarek as a candidate, and of course as a Western Canadian. You know, I was thinking about him just yesterday and how his story actually represents Western Canadian culture almost in a point, because our culture is more about a mindset, if you will, than heritage. And Tarek being all about coming here, adopting our culture and our work ethic and all of those things, and then running for office. He is an amazing individual, and I was so proud to have him as a competitor for the leadership of the party.
Great. Yeah. And I, like I said, always like to keep those things clear, as you're moving forward. So you've got a tough task ahead of you, though. I mean, I was talking the other night on the show, actually, now that the provincial Alberta party is, the UCP is going into a leadership race. And I was talking to Paul Hinman about that a little while back. He leads the Wildrose Independence Party. But when I was in alternative parties, when another party's got a leadership race going, it really makes it tough on you, because everybody's kind of turning to that. And they're saying, oh, we can fix it if we just get this person in or that person in. And it never fixes it. But all the same, you've got that more uphill battle now. You said you want to organize 500 constituencies, or not 500. You want to get 500 people in each EDA, which is great. You got to get that basis. That's how you're going to win it. So what are you going to do it? I mean, it's going to be tough.
Oh, it's a multi-staged approach for sure. Of course, the old-fashioned method of people telling their neighbors about something that they believe in and sharing the platform with them and convincing them to spend the $10 to become a member. That's the traditional way. But of course, that's not the only way anymore. And so you also have to focus on, the social media aspect of it for sure. And that's why I appreciate so much being able to come on to your show this afternoon. And of course, we're going to be working on doing events throughout the province, across the West, I should say, not just Alberta, but of course across the West in the coming, as much time as we have before the next election. It could be as much as 3.5 years, but of course we don't know. So we're just going to stay busy.
Great. So individual policies are tough to formulate and they flex, but one of the big ones, of course, that's associated with the Maverick is autonomy. And a lot of people, you've talked to 5 people about what they think autonomy is, and your chances are you might get 5 different answers. Where do you feel the party sits, and what do you see autonomy as meaning and being?
Well, from the Maverick point of view, and certainly mine, the autonomy would really go back to the provincial realm for us. Right now, if we are looking to push back and against this really cancerous federal government overreach that we've been experiencing here in the West, if we're going to push back against that, the strongest weapon that the Western Canadian has is, of course, in the provincial realm. So the Maverick Party is the only federal party that wishes to ally in the House of Commons with the provinces in order to assist them in getting these autonomous measures implemented. Things like having our own police department, of course, our own police departments across the West, instituting our own pension plans, and ultimately doing our own taxation and then just remitting to Ottawa their portion rather than sending it all to them and then hoping we get some back.
Yeah, and one of the things, I guess, the big distinction is you guys have no plans to ever contest seats east of Manitoba.
Correct. We are going to follow the regional model. There is, of course, another model in Canada that has been quite effective at getting, concessions for the region, and that would be the bloc. We feel that Western Canada needs a similar type of really targeted and specific representation.
Yeah, and your party, it looks like it might have frozen there a little bit.
Did I lose you?
Oh, we got you back again. Okay.
So, all right, where did I lose you, sir? Anyway,
I'm not sure. You were talking about a specific type of representation staying west of the Ontario border. I was just about to start saying it as well. So the initial interim leader there, Jay Hill, who stepped aside now, he was a reformer for 17 years, or at least reformed for the first part, and then the Conservatives later. but he saw what happened. I mean, he started with the Reform Party where they started in the West and then felt that temptation and had to reach out East and ended up watering down and kind of losing everything they had. So he's really applied, I think, that thinking to the Mavericks, saying, no, we're not going to make that mistake again.
100%. History is instructive, isn't it? We've learned that, through these different models that we've tried in the past, what doesn't work. And that is certainly one of them. Of course, our platform is, and our membership is our backstop, our grassroots membership, to make sure that nobody ever changes it, to make sure that we remain regional, that we remain strongly and committed to Western Canadian representation.
Yeah, well, there's where I myself find myself almost bipolar politically, in the sense that, the Bloc Québécois and their stunts in the House of Commons can infuriate me and drive me bananas. But at the same time, you got to admire them, because you know what? Hey, they're as open as they get. They're not apologetic. They're saying, we're here for Quebec. We don't care about the rest of the world. If it's in our interest, we'll support it. If it's not, we won't. And that's the way it goes. And they carry a surprising amount of influence.
Yeah, I during the election, I would often say that I used to be angry with the Bloc, and now I'm more jealous. And that's really where we gotta get to, is we need the types of concessions that they've already achieved in order to make sure that the Western Canadian is not left out of Confederation any longer.
Yeah, and talking about parliaments and how this works, we're not a two-party system in Canada. Minority systems, minority governments can be a little unstable, but they can provide opportunity too. The NDP, much to our horror, is extremely influential in the current federal government and will be for a little while. But then that can remind people, it's not futile to pursue a party that won't win a majority. You can still exercise a great deal of influence in the right situation anyways.
100% right. Our ideal situation would be to form a government that would unite, or not unite, that's the wrong word. People will misunderstand that one for sure. But we'll work with a conservative government that is based in the East. Of course, that would be our goal. And in that type of a situation, of course, we'll work together with a conservative government on so many different issues, of course. Things like a balanced budget, fiscal matters like that. And I believe things like the Firearms registry, we would probably work together on things like that. But when it comes to Western Canadian issues, we would have extreme vigilance to make sure that Western Canadian issues were never lost.
Well, that's it. And I mean, your agenda will have to change. And I in some senses, I've interviewed most of the candidates for leader of the federal Conservatives right now as well. And they hate when they get cornered on things like supply management or equalization or things like that, because they know they have to juggle Quebec's support in order to win with the party they're with. They can't take on those issues very openly, even if they feel a bit that way. It's not even taking it personally. It's just math. If you don't win Quebec and Ontario because they're pursuing a majority, you have to have it. So we either have to accept that we'll have a federal party that would still put our interests second if they want to keep a majority, or look at new alternatives.
Correct. I often say that, any of the federal parties, national federal parties, are stuck. They really have two different faces that they have to show. They have one that they will show in the East, and they'll have another that they show in the West. And it puts them in a terrible spot. I have to feel sorry for them sometimes, perhaps, but I never have to worry about that. I have one employer, and that's the Western Canadian. That's the only people that I have to answer to. And frankly, I don't care what anybody else thinks.
Well, that's it. I mean, with say that recent vote, for example, where they decided to protect the seat count in Parliament for Quebec, no matter what the population is, they're going to have a minimum amount of seats. I mean, theoretically, Quebec could lose everybody except for 75 people. They'd still have 75 seats then. It's ridiculous. And a lot of Conservatives either voted for it, though, or abstained, which is just about as bad. As a leader with where you are, what do you care if you're going to say, oh, right, that's stupid, it's unfair, and we're not going to support that bill? I mean, you don't have to worry about it. Well,
democracy is supposed to be fair, I thought, but apparently not, especially in the eyes of, what was it, 10 Conservative members of Parliament from the West? that voted for Quebec to keep that. One of them was from Red Deer, for heaven's sakes. Candace Bergen actually voted for it, for heaven's sakes. Why would they do this? Does not democracy matter anymore? It's I was going to say disturbing. That's wrong. It's maddening.
Well, it is, and the only way to, I guess, is to avoid having to deal with that kind of, I wouldn't even call it compromise. I just found that one ridiculous. I would have thought that at least they would have dug their heels in on that, but obviously not. To avoid that, though, is if you don't have any incentive to bend your principles to pursue seats that you don't want in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So have you got other events in the burner? Like, are you going to be doing something of a tour, or covering some of those areas? I remember hearing at the meeting you have somebody who's really been organizing strongly in Manitoba, for example. That's a pretty good haul in the truck there.
It is so, and I am intending on, as I did during the campaign, I try and visit as much people face to face. I find there's value in that, and I intend to continue that. Of course, when it's not possible, we are so blessed today that we have the technology available that we do, like right now, for instance. So we're going to use it. But I do believe that face-to-face is best. And so our good people in Manitoba that have been working so hard, I'm looking forward to meeting all those guys face-to-face and talking about the possibilities that are available to Western Canadians across the board, but even in Manitoba, especially in Manitoba, perhaps.
Yeah. Well, it's a swing area, and they've got similar issues to everybody else. It just gets forgotten kind of over there sometimes. Are there, what's the schedule going? As you said, with the minority government, I mean, we could be in an election next week, or it could be 3.5 years. We don't know. So I would imagine you're going to try and start that nomination process sooner rather than later, though, because you got to get those candidates in place, right?
That's correct. We're going to focus for the next, I would say, probably 6 months on membership building. We want to make sure that the memberships, that we have a lot of members in each riding, so that we have a good amount of potential candidates to draw from, because for the Maverick Party, having a strong quality Maverick in the House of Commons is important. I will often say that a Maverick MP, there's no such thing as a backbencher, because according to the Maverick Party policies and guidelines, every vote in the House of Commons is a free vote. So if you don't have a high quality MP, you may not get the type of representation that you wish. So we are dedicated to making sure that all of our candidates are top notch.
Great, and that free vote thing, I mean, it can be a tough juggling act. It's easy to say, when you don't have seats yet, but sometimes there'll be the clashes, so it'll be a hard one to hang on to. That's one of those things we as conservatives, that's where I kind of started the interview wondering about unity and so on. We love ripping our own parties apart. We seem to like building them and going through all that work, and then we all fight with each other and tear them down. And differences in voting, I personally think allowing more free votes allows that to vent and keep the diversity within a party. But it's still a challenge if you had one or two members that vote against something that most of your members don't like. It's a tough issue.
It's true, but you know what? Democracy matters. And I think that will actually help the Maverick Party generate interest in areas that people would assume that we wouldn't. For instance, in urban areas, when the urban voter knows that the Maverick member that they've got in has their interests at heart, so long as, of course, he's going to stay within the policies and guidelines, of course, but he's going to be able to speak to their issues, and democracy matters.
No, that's the way representative democracy is supposed to work. I look at areas like, Lower Mainland Vancouver, the people write off all the time, but they can't forget there were strong Reform Party members. That area is a political hornet's nest, actually. And you'd have a Reform member in one riding, and you'd have an NDP one next to them, and a Liberal next to that. It could go any sort of way. And a Reform member, though, who's actually I should say a Maverick member who's actually going to support, say, a Vancouver riding, wouldn't necessarily vote the same as a member in southern Manitoba. If they're going to follow the proper principles, they might vote against the majority of the party at that point, but that's doing their job.
Correct. That's exactly how it's supposed to work, isn't it?
It is. It just rarely does, unfortunately. But we got to keep trying. In politics, I mean, you're guaranteed to lose if you don't throw your hat in the ring. So
that's right.
Well, I appreciate you coming on to talk to us today, and I'm looking forward to seeing how things develop and talking to you again down the road. Where can people find more information on you and your party, and see where events might be happening or contact you guys?
Of course, our main party website is the Maverick, it's just maverickparty.ca, very easy to find, maverickparty.ca. And you can find everything online there, links to everything that's coming up, all of our policies and guidelines, of course. And of course, you can get a hold of us there as well. Tell us what you think. And as always, I would say, if you're interested in this, I know a lot of people say, don't split the vote. I'll say, what vote? If you like what the Maverick Party stands for, I'd encourage you to buy a membership and do it soon. We'll send a message to Ottawa.
Right on. Well, thanks for your time today, Colin, and we'll talk again soon.
Hey, if there's only one other thing, I was listening earlier and I heard that you were having an issue with finding a high quality bottle of gin. I think we have a local place up here that maybe we could help you out. We'll have to talk later.
Yeah, send me a note. I know there's some good local distilleries starting up all over the place. So yeah.
Cory.
Pass it along. Thanks. Yes, Dave's quite concerned.
Take care.
All right. Thanks, Colin.
Yeah. Bye.
So yeah, that's Colin Krieger. And as I said, they'd held a leadership race, and it was a close one. And they were both really good candidates, Colin and Tarek El-Naga. And they're united and they're getting ready to roll and push. I saw some of the discussion from Wild Rose, and I've seen others. There's some regular commenters I'm not seeing today, but there's others that, we've got to separate now. We got to go now. We got to go now. Fine. But you know what? If you hold a referendum tomorrow, you're going to lose. You're going to lose. Bar none, you're going to lose. It's not ready, guys. It's not ready. I'm not saying don't set that goal, perhaps, and I'm not saying don't go towards that. I'm not saying we won't have to get there at some point. But in the meantime, you still need to do what you can. And whether it's through a differing conservative candidate or a liberal candidate or Maverick or whatever it might be, or PPC. But the secession isn't on the table, guys. It's not there. You won't win that in a referendum. And if you want to set it back, I've said it time and time again, you want to set it back 10 years, hold a referendum tomorrow and lose. You won't get another chance for a long time. So just patience is, I guess, it's a tough one. It's something I'm not terribly good with myself personally, but you need patience. It's not time yet. And everything comes in steps. And some of the things, whatever your goals might be, some people might not want full independence or some might want fully out. Well, things that the Maverick and provincial parties and others are talking about for more autonomy provincially for different provinces, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, things like provincial police forces, the Maverick will help support that, facilitate those sorts of things, provincial pension plan, collecting of your local taxes. Some people might think those are enough things to make them want to stay within Confederation. Some might see them as steps towards getting out, because those are the steps you can get towards winning an independence vote, because the conditions are not there right now. If you had a lot of those things in place already, you might be able to convince a heck of a lot more people to say, yeah, you know what, we got to get out. And they'll vote that way. It's kind of like Sylvia saying there, I agree, it's our only answer perhaps in the long run, but separation isn't in the cards just yet. And it's not. So we got to get realistic, and you got to plan, you got to be strategic, and you got to think of things in the long game. And I know the game feels insufferably long. I led the Alberta Independence Party. I got into that back in 2000, I think 1999 actually, it was 2000. That's 22 years ago. And we're still here, We're still here. And I was full of piss and vinegar then. I was 29 years old when I took over that party. And I was very much of a mind. We've just got to go tomorrow. We got to get out of here. That's the only way. And I still think I was probably right, but there was no way we were going to get out at that point. Here it is 22 years later, and we're still talking about it. I think the support's stronger. I think we've moved in the right direction, agonizingly slowly, but it's not there. So we just have to keep working at it until we are there. Hey, Charlie and Lloydminster, good to see you on board there. So, I'm going to talk about one of our advertisers quickly again, and then we'll go over some news things. I spent a lot of guest time today, which is great, and missed on a lot of news stuff, which is fine. You can always read up on all that stuff on the westernstandard.news as well, of course. So let's talk about Bitcoin Well one more time. Getting back to some of the services they offer. I mentioned they've got ATMs all the way across the West. They're a registered, publicly traded company in Canada, a good Western Canadian company. And part of what they do, they take the mystery out of digital currencies. Like, how is it practical for me? What can I do with it? Well, they can set you up to help you pay your utility bills with it, make car payments, whatever. They can set it up so it automatically goes into your account if you're looking to set it aside as a savings thing. They can help you turn it into a real currency as it is. But I mean, it seems confusing. It's new. It's different. That's what they're all about. They're guiding you through the process. They've got what they call Bitcoin Academy on there. It's all set up about teaching you what Bitcoin's about and what you can do with it. It's partnered with Athabasca University, really professionally done. And as you can see what that says, Bitcoin with a human touch. And that's their main speaking point, is that they offer personalized one-on-one service. You want to make sure you can trust what's going on. You're not talking to a distant call center or a little chat box on the bottom of a website that pops up on you or something like that. You'll have face-to-face meetings with people, or you could do virtual ones. I mean, in Edmonton, Calgary, you can set up a free face-to-face consultation. In some other areas, otherwise you could do a Zoom one, but it's a real person on the other end talking to you. So check them out, bitcoinwell.com. They've been a great sponsor for us, and it's because they offer a great service. Lots of you guys have been going over there and using their stuff, and everybody's been happy with it. So check them out, guys. All right, so let's see. This is some... Speaking of government, speaking of utility, speaking of waste, yes, issues that they always give me lots of fodder to go on about. In Indian affairs, it's, that's the old name for it before any politically correct person gets wound up. That's still what all the federal government things are. They're still called Indian Reserves. It's still called the Indian Act. It's still called Indian Affairs. But they've increased 79% spending, 80% under Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's program to replace what they call colonial structures. And how's that been going? Well, not worth crap. They've hired 2,000 people. As I said, they've raised the spending 79%, but it isn't really doing anything. Just hiring more people, sticking them out there, more civil servants. This is kind of goes back to the rant I had the other day with people who just don't seem to understand government's not the solution, it's the problem. And the more of these boobs you hire, and the more you bloat these already bloated ministries, the less you get done. The people on the ground who are living without good, clean drinking water, who can't get property rights, who are having difficulties getting rolling, well, they're not getting any help out of this. The only ones who are getting help are, of course, a bunch of civil servants and lawyers who thrive on that like a bunch of parasites. And they're parasites. They take our tax dollars and, Prime Minister Hammerhead tosses it towards them and they bloat these ministries. So Indian Affairs, the numbers are coming out and they're just huge and they aren't doing any good. So, I mean, what are we looking at? In 2016, $12 billion was spent on Indigenous programs. And by 2020, it's up to $21.7 billion on Indigenous programs. And how's that all working out? How's it working out? I could live with it if it was being a success. I could live with it if we saw all these pictures. Look at these First Nations communities that are doing excellently and developing resources and employing people and building schools and living life and smiling and having a good old time. But guess what? It's failing. It's failing on every aspect. They got the highest suicide rates in the nation. They got the lowest life expectancy rates in the nation, the highest unemployment rates in the nation, the lowest education rates in the nation, health issues, dirty water, and certainly social discord, highest crime and incarceration rates. We've doubled spending, we made it worse. So maybe spending won't fix it. Crazy concept, isn't it? Problem is, when you're going to take populations of people and isolate them based on race, it's always going to make a mess. I don't know when we're ever going to figure that out. Because what we got with the reserve system is actually apartheid. It is. You're taking a group of people based on race and you're separating them from everybody else. That's the bare definition of it. It failed in South Africa and did catastrophic damage. It was horrible. Terrible what they did over there. We're doing it here and saying we're being nice about it. It's not. They're living in misery on these reserves. And we're doubling spending almost, and how's it doing? Not worth a crap. Look at the outcome. I don't mind the spending if it was working, but it's not. It's making things worse. We're more divided. There's more distrust. There's more discord and more problems for the people on First Nations communities than there's ever been before. So, I don't know. I mean, this gets back to, the futility of making change on the federal front, and it feels like it. I don't know if there were some maverick ones or honest conservative ones, and there are some honest ones out there. At least you could bring these things up and push back a bit. Do what you can. There's no magic bullet. But man, it's just crazy what they're spending on that. And then Dave talks about, he brought that up earlier in the story with CRA, everybody's favorite government department. There's the one where the government really wants to be big and bloated, coming after you to take more of your money, the Canadian Revenue Agency. But apparently, they got so much time on their hands that they're doing side businesses at work. Yeah, I guess this was as Dave said, the allegation came in the case of a $65,000 a year assessments officer. So, some pencil pusher who assesses your taxes, pokes into your personal life and see how much money we could take away from people. It turned out it was fired for attending school meetings during work hours. Hey, there's nothing wrong with bettering yourself and doing some extra things in school and taking courses, but you're being paid for doing something. That other $65,000 is for something. If I was sitting here in the Western Standard and taking courses while online or manning a support line for another business, I'm sure Derek would not be terribly amused. He's paying me to do things related to the Western Standard. What I do after 6 o'clock is my business. But these guys are so bored in CRA that they can take on side jobs and go extra schooling. So full-time doesn't mean full-time, I guess, when it comes to them. So, that's a group that has 41,000 employees. This is who we're paying for. And there's complaints. So let's see, 60% of the disciplinary reports, employees were spending on average every day 10 minutes playing Sudoku, sending chain letters, gaming pools, exchanging profanity. Some of that sounds a little petty. I got to be a little fair here. You got to lighten up a little bit in the workplace, I guess. Somebody wants to send a stupid meme to a coworker and take a minute or get a gaming pool going. It's a balance, right? It's a balance. You find a little bit of stuff, you don't have to have your nose to the grindstone except for every second, when it comes to break time, but you don't want to abuse it either. Somebody showed one employee was spending 2 hours, almost 3 hours a day browsing inappropriate internet content. We can only imagine what that might be. Let's see, on the federal front, here we go. And this will be interesting to find out what's going on. Cynthia Garneau of the Via Rail. She was the CEO of that. It's just a government tax-funded, subsidy pile out there. That's why you see so much of it in the east and so in the little in the west. She's paying $318,000 a year. Suddenly, just up and quit. That's it. There's 2 years left in the contract, and it hasn't really said why. The office won't release the text of her resignation letter. It's our money, but they won't tell us why. I mean, that railway lost $370 million last year. So there's one aspect of why she should be leaving, but then in that case, she should be fired, not quitting. 300 and some thousand a year for that sort of outcome. But it's because it's these people fixated on rail, and it's really actually not a good form of transportation anymore. At least not for people. But the only one questioning it, again, Pierre Poilievre is up there getting on him. Why are we subsidizing these guys? Because it's just not paying off and it's not performing. That won't change anytime soon. Here was a beauty too. CTV, yes, reporting that Ottawa citizens were complaining about generator noise during the blackouts because, they've had some terrible storms out there in central Canada. Power is out all over the place. Actually, one of our columnists, David Creighton, sent me one. Said it was delayed because of, having on and off email and so on. But, the snowflakes of Ottawa are woken by generators. I'm sorry, my mom's respirator's generator is keeping you awake at night, you whining bugger. Is it really? Is this the PTSD thing from the horn honking that actually did travel down? Is this what happened? Now, even in the middle of a disaster, you're going to whine about generators? That's how the lights come on, Peckerhead. We're supposed to live with candles. Guess what? That's what you get from a city that's dominated by civil servants. That's what you get from the entitlement class, the ones that the world owes them everything, probably blaming the Western Canada and oil production for causing the storm in the first place. And they're still whining that their lights are out, still whining that the heat's not off, still whining that they can't watch The View, but at the same time, ticked off because generators are loud. Yes, they're loud. Buy a solar panel for your house. See how well it works out for, it's not feasible. Okay. It's making the news. What else we got? Trudeau. Yeah, they got on his case as he was going to a Kamloops memorial. And, what do you expect? So I guess they were chanting and pounding drums as he walked. The guy's getting less and less and less popular. But we still can't seem to bloody get rid of him. Nobody likes him. It's hard to find anybody anymore who says they like him, except in Toronto and Montreal. got to be able to get rid of that guy somehow. I'm not sure what it'll take. But I mean, he's not being greeted with a friendly eye anywhere he goes. So, I mean, he's vulnerable. That party's vulnerable. Can change it. Not sure how. Maybe, I'd be a strategist somewhere if that was the case. But he's not, this isn't the Trudeau, the sunny ways of 7-8 years ago. This isn't being welcomed by rock star crowds and women throwing their panties at him and such, or whatever might have been happening back then. Now he's just more of an embarrassment who gets jeered at where he goes. So let's keep working with that. We can get rid of that clown. It won't fix everything. It won't fix the Canadian system, but man, we got to be able to do better than that. Speaking of which, Schweitzer, he's a cabinet minister in Alberta, and Doug Schweitzer, and he ran in the last leadership for the UCP, and he's come out because a lot of people were asking and looking forward to him running for it, perhaps running for the leadership, has come out quite clearly and decisively saying no, he's not going to run for the leadership, and in fact, he's not even going to run for re-election in 2023. He's done, which is too bad. I mean, he was a little on the red Tory side, but I always found him to be quite principled, well-spoken, bright enough guy. It's hard to keep principled, well-spoken, bright people in politics. It really hard is. It seems the dumber they are, the longer they last. So yeah, I'm getting back to Trudeau again. But I mean, hey, it's his decision. If he's gotten his taste of elected office for the last few years and decided that he didn't like it, well, move on. He's got a young family. Move into something else. It's unfortunate though. So there's still only 2 declared contenders for that leadership. There's doubtless going to be some more. That's still just all stewing and brewing. But Schweitzer is not going to be one of them. That was that one I spoke on with that pervert who assaulted a woman after being, he's a child rapist. It's just awful. It's just awful. So let's see. That's about good enough for today, guys. I think we can wrap things up. Lots to talk about. As I said, tomorrow I'm going to talk a little more review on the World Economic Forum and some of the stuff that those guys have in mind and some of their plans. I'm going to put that into my monologue, and we'll discuss a little bit of that. I'm also going to have Michelle Sterling from Friends of Science coming on to discuss those things as well as a guest, and maybe another guest popping into the mix there as well. So thank you all for tuning in today, guys. Looking forward to the Battle of Alberta tonight. Try not to drink too much. The hangovers are hard to get up with the next morning, but enjoy yourselves. Thank you for tuning in. I'll see you tomorrow at 11:30.